Hi everyone. So in this video, our next feature will be that we would like to display the euro as a currency for the product prices. So the feature description would go like this. As a rental business employee, I want to see amounts labeled as euro in my application so that I can know that it is a monetary amount that I enter. So let's take a look on how to achieve that. I think we can, have some small solutions and some big solutions for that. So let's start very small. So the first one that we can definitely change is if we go to our product edit screen, then we actually will see that we have an amount field here. And right now it's of type text field. So if I change that to currency field and pass in the currency as euro, then it should already make the UI, let's say the UI representation almost a little bit better. So if we go here, then now you can see it's already displayed with a proper euro sign, and also the alignment is on the right side. Okay, but I think we can do even a little bit more. So in order to achieve the next thing is, if we look at our data model, and we have our product price, up until now the amount is represented as a big decimal, and I think we can actually change that in order to make it actually an embedded type, which we will call money. So let's just create that here. So this will be a JPA entity. It's called money, and it will actually not of type entity but of type embeddable. And then we have the amount value, which is now once again big decimal. So this seems to be just fine. It should be actually mandatory. And then we will also have a currency field. And this currency should actually be an enum, so I will cancel that here for now and just create a new enum. And this enum just represents all the currencies that we currently support in our application. For now, we could switch to, just create 2 of them. So going back to the money class, we can now create another attribute which we will call currency, and this will be of type enum, and then it will be the currency value. So we can also make that mandatory, and with that we can now go to our product price and change this definition here, or even, like for now just create a new attribute which we will call price, and then it's attribute type embedded, and now we will reference the money attribute here, or the entity. Okay, so if we go back to our money, we should also fix the null annotations. And then the next thing that we have to do, if we go back to our product price, you can see right now we have the amount, and we also have this price field. And this amount value here is actually in this price amount column, and it's still a big decimal. So this means what we can do is to change our liquid-based generated script and basically just rename this column to be this column. So this should actually do the job. So let's for now just get rid of this, and also get rid of this. The instance name we have to, we can probably make it like this here, and just assume that this will actually do the trick. We did not specify an instance name here, so let's create that and just pass in both of those. Yeah, and probably this should already be enough for now. Okay, when we now go here back to our product price, we now have everything in place, besides the fact that now the UI fields actually won't work. But let's for now just generate the Liquibase changelogs and take a look on what is going to be generated here. So first of all, we will have an add column, and then we have a definition of this amount. Then there's also a not null constraint, and then we have the same for the currency. And here we also have a null value. I will actually set that to euro, this null value, in order to make the migration succeed. And then we have our drop column for this amount for this table. So let's just store that and manually go into this file and change it accordingly to our needs. So first of all, it will be create exactly like this. So we want to have now product price with currency. And so the first thing is that we do not need to create an add column, but instead what we want is to basically rename our column. And for this we have, if you go to the Liquibase documentation, you will find an example for rename column. So this should be it. I think we can just take it from here and just apply it according to our needs. So if we look at this one here, we probably don't need that. Then also the remark schema name, and this is also not needed. What we do need is the new column name and the old column name. So the old column name would be amount, and the new column name would be price amount. The table is going to be the product price table. And so this means we can already get rid of this one here. We can mirror this column data type, and with that we should be able to remove this. And then the next thing is that we right now have a not null constraint generated here. So let's actually take a look on how this currently looks like. So when I go here and say let's do it like this. So I just create a DDL definition of the table on how it currently looks. And right now we do have a not null constraint. So this should not change at all. So this means we can also get rid of it because we're just renaming this column here. And with that, we can also remove this drop column because we just have that in this change set now. And for this one, we still need it because we actually didn't have that before. So with that, I think we can start the application and take a look on the outcome of the Liquibase changelog. So as you have seen here, it was actually successfully run. So if we now go to our application, then it probably is still broken because we didn't adapt our UI, but we can fix that in a second. So now we have this amount column, but this amount column is actually not targeting this attribute anymore. So let's fix that and go to our product price screen. And here we actually, okay, so probably let's do it like this. So we will get rid of this field and instead generate the new attribute here to our screen and take a look on what the result is. So we will have a text field for the price amount field, and we will have a price currency field. So if we take a look at the result, okay, so let's restart, or let's try once again. I don't know why it hasn't been loading. Okay. Sorry. Of course, it didn't change here because we just changed the editor and not the table. So this is why the problem actually was not updated. So, but here what we now see is that we have this amount field, and then we also have this currency drop down here because it's an enum. But what we also want to fix is this table here, and for that we need to go into the product edit screen, and there we have this table, and here you can already see that the amount column is not really there, so it should probably just be the price. And since we have defined this instance name, it should already be correctly represented here in this table. What we probably can also do is to make this alignment right, so that it's properly displayed. And okay, so with that we are already in a good situation. Besides the fact that if I, for example, now say it costs 10 euros, so the unit would be a month, 10 euros, without any, or with just 10 euro 50 or whatever, then it will actually also display like this. So it doesn't have two decimal entries here, but instead just one. And this is what we can also fix. So if we go to the documentation from Jmix, we have information about the representation of this decimal format, which is actually used under the hood for big decimal values. And this has some, defined format here, which we can just change in our message bundle. So if we go to our message en.properties, we can either duplicate this definition here, or what we can also do is we can replace those two last ones here with zeros, and the representation of that is that now there will always be a number displayed. So this means with that change we should always see our two, like 10 euro 50, and then it's not a 5 but actually a 50 at the end. So let's just create a new one here. As you can already see here, the amount is now properly displayed, and also here it's correctly displayed. So with that we now achieved actually even more, because we allowed the users to set the currency values in the application. Probably this is not what we need at this stage, and I want to actually change that now a little bit and show you one other thing. So let's just assume we will basically configure that for our whole application, and instead this currency is just once again displayed as a currency field. So let's try to fix that. And we go to our product price edit, and so first of all we can make that once again this currency field, and instead of having this combo box here, we will basically just define the currency programmatically here in the definition of the controller. So the first thing is that we will generate a handler, and this will be init entity event. So this means always when we create a new entity through this UI, then it will actually call this method. And what we can do is so what we now need to do is first of all set the set the actual price value here. So this means, let's call it euro price, and we'll create a new variable. And for that, we actually need to inject data context. And so with this euro price, we can set the currency is euro and just save it like this. So let's see if this already changes a little bit. But what we also want is to say that this price amount field, so we want to set the currency. And here we can basically just pass in this currency value as well. So first of all, we can just set the toString method. Okay, it didn't change actually because I defined that here in this init entity, which just means that it only happens when a new entity is created. So this means for the existing ones, it was actually not displaying that. So this is definitely not what we want. So let's generate another handler, and this will be before show. And let's fix that for now. Just put it here. Okay, so now we have the euro value, but it's actually just hard coded now in the UI and not actually taking this value from the entity. So probably it would be better if we just do it after show. So this is when all the data is loaded, and then we will put it here, and instead of taking this currency value, we will actually get edited entity, get price, and we will get currency toString. Okay, so the result is still the same, but if we now would change it to USD and then just create a new one, then it will actually be US dollar. So this is now only based on the attribute here itself. And right now we still do this as a hard-coded value. So let's see how we can make that a little bit more configurable. Let's say for our application configuration. So instead of doing it like this, what we can also do is put it into our application properties as the default currency that we would like to have in our application. So in order to achieve that, what we can do is to create a new Java class here, which we will call rentyourstuff properties. And so what this class is doing here is basically it's a representation of configurations that we would like to configure here in this particular application properties. So when we now, for example, say rys.currency and then give it a euro, then it should be bound by this class, as a configuration option. So how this is done is basically if we go, so we have to create a bean in our, for example, in our application class here, similarly to what we have done here, or what has been generated here. And here you can see there's also another example where we define those data source properties, and it will load all the configuration properties from this particular key set and then bind it into this object here. And if you take a look, then there are like a couple of attributes which we basically then have as a one-to-one representation in this application properties. So let's do it like this as well. we'll go to our application class here and say this will be rentyourstuff properties. And here we will just give it the prefix rys and say, so this is going to be a new instance of that. And for making this binding correct, we also need another one, which we will, which is an annotation called constructor binding. And then probably we also need getter and setter for those two, for this attribute here. And as you see here, we are directly referencing the enumeration. So it's not, you know, as a string bound from this application properties or something. It's actually expecting to have a proper currency value. So this means if we now pass in this value, or let's actually take a different one and take a look on how this actually works. So this is Spring Boot standard functionality. So this has nothing really to do with Jmix, but still we can leverage it here. What you can see is that the application fails to start because we have configured a wrong value. So this means here's, you know, some form of type checking is actually going on here. And it said, okay, so I cannot bind this property RYS currency to this particular enum, and the value is actually not present, but what are present values is euros or US dollar. So this means we can make that happen by starting the application once again. And furthermore, what is also possible is that we can do Java X bean validation here. So for example, right now, okay, so the application started, but what if, for example, I now say I will just not, just not define these values, or this particular one. So what happens now? If I now start the application, it probably is fine, and it will just start, and it means that we don't have a configured value. If we now want to change that to be required, what we can do is to say validated. So this is the annotation for checking the bean validation, and then we can say, for example, not null. So by doing that and starting our application once again, it should actually be not possible anymore to start our application without defining a proper default currency. So here you can now see that there's a binding error, and yeah, it just explains the problem. So with that, now we have basically everything in place, and this means the last, or let's actually take it to USD once again. So this means the last piece here in the puzzle basically is to load this from this configuration or from this properties. So what we can do is AutoWire private rentyourstuff add properties. And since this is now just a regular Java bean, we can just call the getCurrency method in it, and then it should actually take this from the application properties and then pass it on as a proper bound value into our application. So let's take a look now what we should see if we now create or edit a value. We should have the US dollar here in place. Okay, so with that, I think we can now change it accordingly. So there's one last thing that I now didn't, or that we can actually fix. So right now we just use this toString method, which is actually probably not what we want because it has not the translation in it. So this means if we go here into our translation, then you see that it's actually, this is the proper translation, and in the running application, you still see, just the toString representation of that. So what we can, for example, do is to make the proper sign here in this translation, and then the next thing would be that we actually, load this information or just render it as the translated value and not as the toString value of the enum. So once again, we can go here, and there's another bean which is called messages. And this messages bean has a particular method. So there's get message, and this get message has now overloaded variants of it. And one thing is that you can pass in an enum, and it will properly translate then according to what we have configured in our message properties. So this means what we can do is we can pass in this one here, and just take this corresponding value. So let's take a look on how this looks. So now we have the correct value present there. And yeah, I think with that we are almost done. So let's probably just change that back to the euro. And then, yeah, for now we can just leave it like this. The interesting part here that we have not covered is, or the last part that we didn't cover is here it's not needed, or so here we have to set the currency value and just pass in the string. If you look at the money class, we currently don't have that because we just pass in this currency value. So I think what we can do is to inject beans into this method. So let's actually try that, and then it would be get currency, because get currency will result as the correct value. So let's try if this works. Actually, I'm not 100% sure if this is supported. I think it was supported in the last version from Cuba, but I'm not 100% sure. Okay, so here it should display the toString method. I'm sorry, the translated value. So if we go here and make it euro, okay, so should be reloaded by now. Let's try again. Yeah, so now it correctly displays that value based on this instance name here. Okay, so with that we can basically put it back, and as you can see, it's actually now sorry, here the money class. So it's now actually basically taking this message from the messages API. So with that, I think we have now covered everything that we want until now. Probably at some later stage, it can be made more dynamic. We can, for example, if we introduce like a tenant-based approach, we can make that a configuration of the tenant and not of the global application or whatever. So there are various ways on how to do that. And the reason why I put this currency here also into the database, although right now we don't really leverage that, is just to have it an easier migration path, when to the point when we have multiple currencies available to the end user, and basically allow them to change that accordingly. Okay, so with that, I think we are done with this feature request. So I will just commit that after the video. So yeah, thanks for watching, and see you next time.